am officially like... So this stream is going to be a little bit different. I'm recording this live with the intention of posting it over on YouTube. So it's going to be a bit more scripted than usual, and I'm going to pay slightly less attention to the chat comments until I'm done. So that's why you don't see the chat on the screen and stuff like that. I'm also going to be talking very candidly about some information that I've spent the past nearly week preparing for you, but I had minimal time to put together the actual presentation of the facts and situation, so please pardon any slowness on my end. I'm still very tired from the long drive, and I'm glad to be home and streaming, but I am completely drained. That's why I look a little tired. First, I am a little afraid to talk about this. One, I fear that speaking out about this sort of thing is what could get me blacklisted from a convention that I would really like to continue doing, in spite of it being, well, not so great. Two, the Artist Alley coordinator, or at least someone very close to him, already knows my face, name, studio name, and general disappointment for what transpired at A-Kon this weekend, so there's no way to prevent anyone from finding out that this was me, so that's why I'm going to do this very publicly. And three, I don't like talking bad about other artists or people in the Artist Alley or Dealers Hall, so I'll be omitting names in order to protect their identity and, again, myself, as much as I can. All of that being said, I want to thank everyone who came out to A-Kon to support the community and all the hardworking artists and vendors who helped make the show possible. And thank you guys for supporting me as well. Without attendees in the community, this show wouldn't have been possible, nor would I be willing to return to the area without your support. So it's thanks to you guys that I'm even going to be returning to A-Kon at all, hopefully. Basically, A-Kon was a disorganized mess. For those of you unfamiliar with A-Kon, it's one of the longest running conventions in the United States, celebrating its 29th anniversary in 2018, which, for those of you who are tuning in on YouTube, is a year that this video is going to be addressing. So first, I want to start with the badge situation. Most extremely large conventions like A-Kon will mail their badges to their pre-registered recipients. Yes, this costs the convention a bit more money to do, but that cost is something that should be built into the cost of the badge. If it's not built in, it's something that could be offered as kind of like an add-on, where the pre-registering attendee could opt to pay a nominal fee to have their badge sent to them, so that they don't have to wait in any lines the day of the convention. Makes sense, right? Not only did A-Kon not mail their badges, and they never do, they do not even offer the option to have them mailed. I don't really understand that decision, but I'm sure there must be a sound reason for it from the convention's perspective, or at least I really hope that there's one. Because the badge situation this year was a nightmare for attendees, and I had a front row seat to watching that dumpster fire. Attendees who purchased their badges in advance had no choice but to wait in a line anywhere from 4 to 7 hours on Thursday if they wanted to take full advantage of their 4-day badge. Unfortunately, by the time they were able to get through the line, most of the panels and events had already concluded for Thursday. This means that most of the people waiting in the line for the pre-purchased badges were left with an entire day of the convention that was nothing more than a line. No panels, no exhibit hall, no artist alley, nothing. Just a long line. The A-Kon 29 Twitter hashtag was full of complaints from attendees begging the convention to get their act together, citing that badges could have been mailed. Several of the tweets I found stated that they would have gladly paid extra for the shipping so that they could have enjoyed the full convention. Most of the comments were full of anger and disappointment, dubbing A-Kon 29 as quote-unquote LineCon. As if to add insult to injury, we learned that the pre-purchase line was merged with on-site registration. In other words, people who hadn't paid for their badge already. This was one of the earliest signs of poor management for the convention that I was able to witness while I was setting up. They had a whopping 12 registration lines to handle the full traffic of early registration, as well as on-site registration with no distinction as to which lines were for which. It was a massively unorganized event and resulted in attendees missing out on the content that they had paid for. To add even more salt to an open wound, no, we're not done. We later learned that Thursday panels were open to people without badges, thus negating the entire purpose to even waiting in line to participate, thus negating the entire purpose of a Thursday badge altogether. So, that makes me wonder, what was even the point in charging for badges for a 4-day con when you have nothing that you're offering that requires you to have a badge for 4 full days? Why not just offer a 3-day badge? So on Thursday, they didn't have access to Artist Alley. They didn't have access to an exhibit hall. There were no main events, and the panels were offered for free. So what was the point? Aside from watching all of that transpire on Twitter and in front of my booth, I had little other experiences with traversing the convention since I was usually glued to my table. However, I did notice that there was a significant problem with the flow of the crowd in the convention center's exhibit hall. It was like people couldn't really figure out where they were supposed to go. This was a result of a large number of problems. First, there was only a very small entry point and way too many exits. Second, the convention was too long. Had some of the side exits been used as the entry point and the entrance been used as the exit, it would have allowed for a much more natural flow. Yes, this would have required more volunteers, but there were already volunteers located next to those doors throughout most of the convention anyways. Their only role seemed to be to direct people to the correct entrance, which was all the way on one side of the very long hall. So you had to walk all the way down to the end from where most of the parking was just to get to the entrance of the exhibit hall, just to walk all the way back down it. The third problem was the location of the autographs, which took up 2 aisles in the far back right corner of the floor. No, the autographs were not necessarily near where I was, even though I was also in the back. There were 2 types of autograph booths. The first being about 8 formal autograph stations, complete with maze-like, rope-like lines. These booths would feature 1 guest at a time and then rotate out for another guest. The second type of autograph booth was a designated 4-foot table for select guests, which were located on 2 rows, back to back. These tables and spaces had little, if no room for a line to form, resulting in the line conflicting with general convention traffic as it wrapped all the way around the aisle. The fourth problem with the flow, which became the biggest issue for my booth, was the lack of anything to do at the back of the hall. With nothing to draw the crowd to the back, other than literally waiting in more lines, there was no reason for attendees to go back there or to make it a priority. This makes the convention feel incomplete when you walk the showroom floor. It also cheapens the quality of the booth that someone paid for to get comparable traffic as other booths, because we won't see as nearly as many people because there's, again, no reason to go back there. A-Kon volunteers tried to tell me that I would get more exposure by being adjacent to the registration area, which in fact my booth was facing. While yes, this resulted in a few sales, it's not even remotely comparable to what traffic I could have gotten had I been down any other aisle and not facing into the literal emptiness of the back of the convention hall. Furthermore, once the line was cleared, there was no longer any potential for exposure. And additionally, I wouldn't want my booth and potential sales to be the consolation prize for those who are waiting in a 5+ hour line just to pick up their badges. As I previously mentioned, attendees were dubbing A-Kon 29 as LineCon. Artist Alley check-in was no exception. When I arrived, there was a huge line that seemed like it wasn't moving. I opted to completely load in before even getting to my badge later that evening, when the line was fortunately much shorter. Load-in was easy thanks to the large load-in doors and relatively easy access to them since I arrived so early. I also had help from my assistant, so that made things much easier than it usually is. This is one thing I really appreciate about A-Kon, the load-in bays. Once you figure out where they are, it makes everything really easy. As I already mentioned, my booth was at the far back of the very long convention hall, with no reason to go to that area of the showroom floor. There wasn't even an exhibit located by me. On Friday, when I went to my booth, there was a huge wall that had been put up, blocking my booth from literally everything, and I'm actually going to show you guys a picture of that. So this is what my booth was facing. Literal emptiness, and this was pretty much what the traffic looked like on a daily basis. I took pictures roughly every half hour for you so that you could see what my booth actually looked like. This is what it looked like from my table. That's a cosplayer, and this was actually a relatively busy part. And then more nothing. This was also this was on Saturday. This is what Saturday looked like at my con. Also, Bakugo, right? So that is what I was looking at for the entire con, to give you guys an idea. And speaking of the wall, I'm going to pull that image up for you as well. The wall was put up before it opened on Friday. So this was me measuring. This is a tape measure that I always bring with me. And I measured it so that you guys could see how many inches. It was a whopping 34 inches between my table and the wall. 34 inches between my table and the wall. So that gives you guys an idea of how much space was actually there. So, as I already mentioned, my booth was at the far back of the very long convention hall with no reason to go to that area of the showroom floor. There wasn't even an exit located by me. And on Friday when I went to my booth, there was a huge wall that had been put up, blocking my booth from literally everything. To try to light a fire under them to get the wall taken down faster. I don't think it worked. Although I did start live tweeting and tagging the convention in my tweets, and that seemed to get some results. Within 2 minutes of every tweet, someone was there to try to calm me down. It might have been coincidence, but I like to think that the social media posts that I and the other artists in what we dub the back alley were making actually made a difference. I was repeatedly told different things about why the wall was even there. First, it was that it wasn't supposed to be there anymore, but that it was supposed to be up before the convention started, and at the end of the day. The next volunteer told me that it was supposed to stay up until the regular attendees entered at 10 a.m., which meant that the VIP pass holders, people who paid more for their convention experience, who entered at 9:30 a.m., would not be able to even experience the full convention even if they wanted to. The third person told me that it was never supposed to have gone up in the first place, and that it was the convention center's fault. The fourth person told me that it was a miscommunication between the convention center and the Artist Alley crew. The fifth person I spoke to came around when the wall was finally being removed. She was with autographs, and it seemed like she had a lot more sway in getting the wall taken down and was apologizing to everybody. The wall was put up every afternoon after the show closed and remained up until just before the show would open each day, essentially ruining any of that promised exposure that I was supposed to get from being in front of registration. This effectively partially negated that exposure that I had been assured I was going to have by being in the back of the convention facing the attendee line. It also made it impossible for any vendors or artists to shop my booth before and after the convention each day. While the wall was up, some attendees had attempted to squeeze into the aisle, but found that they couldn't stand and browse booths or even walk well because of the oncoming traffic. A woman in a wheelchair actually got stuck on my aisle because of the wall. All of that aside, I just can't imagine why the wall wasn't stopped from being put up in the first place. I was in the hall when they started putting it up, and I was in the dealer's room, watching it happen, but I had no idea where these large panels were actually being taken. But I saw the panels being moved along their tracks against the far wall by where the loading bay was for at least 30 minutes that morning. During that time, what was being done by convention staff to stop it from going up? Why wasn't something said before it was completed? This was, again, more poor organization on A-Kon's part. The con went about as you would expect it to, with me being in the far back facing absolutely nothing. It was almost a complete disaster for me, but thanks to those of you who turned up, found me, and supported me, I did alright. I was still up by 5% from the prior A-Kon, but that wasn't even comparable to what I've been up by when I compare other conventions to their prior years. I attribute this poor performance to the layout of the convention and my booth placement. I attribute doing just enough to justify to come back to the show, to you guys, and to my own hard work. All of that aside, there's something that I'm afraid to talk about, but I'm going to address it because I do think it plays a significant part in the dynamic of a convention, and that's bootleg art and traces. The Artist Alley should be a place where artists who create their art from start to finish can showcase their work, engage with fans, and sell their art. It should not be a cesspool of bootleg, traced art, and filtered images. As a consumer, if I peruse the Artist Alley, I expect it to be the full and complete work of the artist sitting behind the table, not someone else. I would be gravely disappointed if I were to have purchased something that was traced. As an artist, I have integrity. I know that tracing someone else's work is wrong. I know that tracing official work is wrong. I know that Funimation and other license holders don't want you making replicas of existing merchandise and imagery. If you're making fan art, you should be coming up with your own versions of things and turning that idea and concept into a reality, not regurgitating something that you found on the internet, or worse, just printing it out and trying to pass it off as your own. I was happy to participate in A-Kon because they, for years, have taken a hard stance against tracing, bootlegs, and copying official merchandise. This is one of the reasons that I applied to A-Kon's Artist Alley. I like that they're strict. I like that they are filtering what they're going to allow into their alley and respecting the guidelines that licensees and distributors have laid out for them, namely Funimation. Their Artist Alley rules are no longer available on their website, so I can't show you examples from there. However, I can share with you the email that they sent out prior to the convention to remind people of what can and cannot be sold at their convention. So I'm going to open that email up and share it with you now. So this is a very long email. I'm not going to read all of it, but I do want to show you that this is from the A-Kon Artist Alley, and the email at the top is akonaa@a-kon.com. The subject line is A-Kon 29 Artist Alley information, and it was addressed to me, among others. The dates for this event are June 7th through the 10th, 2018. The part in question, I'm going to go down all the way to Artist Alley item rules. All items in the Artist Alley must be made by the artist who runs the booth or a previously approved proxy. While the artist is allowed and even encouraged to have helpers, the artist should be available or easily contacted if away from the booth throughout the show. So please remember this point. All items in the Artist Alley must be made by the artist who runs the booth. Point 2. All art must be original or unique fan art, allowable under fair use. No tracing, flat, filter, or splatter artwork, or bootlegs. I'm going to read that one more time. All art must be original or unique fan art, allowable under fair use. No tracing, no filter or splatter work, no bootlegs. No copyrighted logos are allowed unless you hold the copyright. If you own the copyright, please bring documentation with you. Stickers, okay, this gets into stickers. We're not going to get into that. Fan art and original plush art are allowed with the following caveats. The fan art plush must be handmade. Emojis are allowed. Original plush may be handmade or factory made from an original design. No factory made fan art based plush, including emojis. T-shirts stealing images and running them through a filter is not permitted. I'm going to read that one more time. Stealing images and running them through a filter is not permitted. They also talk about how pixel art is not allowed, but they had pixel art at this convention as well. So I'm going to read this one more time, just parts of it. All art must be original or unique fan art allowable under fair use. No tracing, no filter or splatter work or bootlegs. All items in the Artist Alley must be made by the artist who runs the booth or a previously approved proxy. No copyrighted logos are allowed. No tracing, no filter or splatter work or bootlegs. Please just keep that in mind, guys. Just to be clear, one more time, no tracing. Am I right? All right. Setting that aside, Funimation's policy also strictly states that they have a zero tolerance for bootlegs. So the question then becomes, what is a bootleg? How is it defined? I did a Google search, okay? Bootlegs are created with the intention of making a product that looks nearly or absolutely identical to official works or existing products. Bootlegs, by definition, are illegal reproductions. A trace of official art is an illegal reproduction by this definition. Tracing does have a time and a place. It's called when you're learning. Learning by tracing is a great way to pick up a style and understand how things fit together, especially if you're trying to learn how to draw a perspective. However, tracing is not meant to be used to produce original content. It's not meant as a means to create something that one claims as his or her own. It's strictly for educational purposes. Otherwise, it's considered stealing, and legit artists take art theft very seriously. So, now that we've established what a bootleg is, and what a trace is, and that A-Kon has explicitly stated that they do not allow either in their artist alley, I'd like to show you what this actually looks like with an example from this weekend. The following images, among others, and from various booths, were shown to Jason Knight, who claimed that he was with the Artist Alley and would protect our identities from the Artist Alley chair and jury, which it now seems like he is the one sending the emails, so I'm probably already screwed. To be very clear, the situation that was presented to Jason was not regarding one artist, but several. These samples are just from one particular artist for the sake of brevity and because I got really tired. So the first image, to be clear, I am in Photoshop right now. And this is official art of Spike Spiegel. Look familiar to everybody? I'm going to turn this off for a second. I'm going to turn this on and crank this up. This is an image that I found off of one of the artist's pages that he claims is a chalk rendition of a character that he did. He claims that he did this art. So I'm going to turn back on the original layer. Okay? And now we're going to turn on the other layer. And I'm literally going to just turn down the opacity. And you can see how exact it is. It is almost a perfect duplicate of the original Spike Spiegel. Right down to where all the shadows are. So I'm going to turn this off one more time. The original with the fan art overlaid. A simple Google search for Spike Spiegel will pull up this image also. This is not a difficult image to find. I am not very good at image searching. So this is one of the examples, and here's the second. This is an official image of Krillin taken from Dragon Ball Z. This is a screenshot, and I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn on the second image from the exact same, this is from the exact same icon that he was using to promote himself at A-Kon. And now I'm going to do the same trickery and reduce the opacity. And look at how perfect it is. Everything right down to where the lines are on the face is exact. This is an actual thing. So, like I said, I'm not going to be talking about who this is. I'm not here to do that kind of thing. But I did want to show you guys what a trace looks like and how easy it is to figure out that it is a trace. Like I said, we showed these images to Jason Knight, who claimed that he was with the Artist Alley and that he would not be divulging any of it. When shown these images, Jason initially looked disappointed and irritated and said that he would bring up the issue to the jury. When he returned to us, eventually, to report back on his findings, he informed us that the jury had said that it was fine because they were official poses and that official poses could be heavily referenced and traced. I stressed to him that tracing is illegal and it creates bootleg products that are forbidden at A-Kon per their rules about bootlegs and tracing. I informed Jason that they had even sent a reminder email, the one that I just read to you, to all the artists emphasizing the rules of the convention and stating that breaking the rules, even the ones that are not listed, could result in removal, among other things. Jason then pulled up the email to emphasize his point that tracing was acceptable. Unfortunately for him, his email clearly stated no tracing, to which he attempted to tell me that it was only referring to tracing official logos and branding. First, as you saw, that's not what the email said at all. Second, we informed him that there were plenty of examples of logo infringement in the alley as well. At that point, he stared at me for a while, gave no response, and then eventually thanked me for my feedback and left. He made it very clear that he was done with the conversation and that nothing would be done to enforce A-Kon's very clearly stated policies. In fact, they were in support of the traced art and had even given a prime location on the corner booths and aisles to these types of vendors. I did inform Jason that I would remember this for the next time that I did A-Kon, and that when I did A-Kon again, it would be as a vendor, because I wasn't going to participate in an alley that allowed such things to continue. By allowing traced art, they are diminishing the quality and integrity of their alley. Because of the jury system, there is a potential for artists who produce their own works to be rejected, and in the case of A-Kon this year, willfully replaced with people who do not create their own art. How is this a fair jury process for those who follow the rules? If this is the policy of the A-Kon jury, then traced art is acceptable in spite of what their rules state. And from the looks of it, they do not even know what their own rules are, nor do they care. If this is the case, what's the point of having a juried artist alley? What is the point of the rules at all? Sorry.